Hi, everybody. I am, for the sake of leaving it simple, I am Dr. Tay. I love doing anything and everything science. I especially love making sure that kids find the fun in science. And one way that Dr. A and Dr. Tay, myself, are doing this is by having these couch conversations between you guys and people that are already in fields of STEM-related careers. So I used to do neuroscience. Anybody know what neuroscience is?
It's the study of the brain.
Right. So I used to study the brain. In particular, I was looking at neurologic. I see some chuckling over there in Taryn and company. And specifically, I was looking at the brain of kids and trying to figure out why kids have certain diseases. So now I am just trying to make sure more and more kids understand science through other fun platforms. But something that I want y'all to tell us, what is your favorite hobby and your favorite color? So for me, I love singing, and now I'm getting onto this TikTok stuff, so I'm trying to do all my little trendy dancing. And my favorite color is green, but I also like pink, gold, and black. So who wants to go next?
Colors.
I know.
A lot of colors, Dr. You went from one favorite color to 5.
I did. So who wants to go next?
My favorite thing to do is
You have to tell us your name first. You have to tell us your name first.
My name is Kayla Horn, and I love to dance, and my favorite color is pink.
Yay.
Good stuff.
Anybody else over there want to tell us something?
Me?
Okay.
My name is Isabella Massey, and I love to dance, and my favorite color is purple and pink. I love TikTok songs.
Okay, Lily, your turn.
My name is Kayla Horn, and I love to do gymnastics, and my favorite color is red.
Okay. Isabella, don't you do cheerleading too?
Yeah.
I know, I've seen it. Okay, who wants to go next? Anybody want to go?
That's it.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Okay.
Dr. Aisha's coming.
I'll go next since you all won't go. So I'm Dr. A, and very much like Dr. Tay, I studied the brain. I'm a neuropharmacologist. So neuro is the brain, and pharmacology is the study of drugs and how they interact in different parts of the body. So that is what I did before I moved on to administration. I love science and all things STEM, which is why I am collaborating with Dr. Tay to do this. And let's see what's up. What else? Favorite colors: sage green and red. Those are my favorite colors. And I love to travel. That would be a hobby. Yeah, that's it.
Anybody else want to go? Anybody want to introduce themselves or their favorite things to do and their favorite color?
So my name is Miss Evelyn, and I'm here with my homeschool students. I love to dance, and my favorite color is yellow. I'm so happy to be here, and I love all things science too.
Yay. I know some of you.
Zay, Mackenzie, Jocelyn, Gabrielle, you all want to tell us at least what your hobby is and your favorite color? You can keep it simple if you're shy. No?
Come on, y'all.
Hi, my name is Jocelyn. I like to dance, and my favorite color is blue.
Okay. Nice. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Thank you.
I think Mackenzie was coming on. Go ahead, Mackenzie. I felt it.
Do it, Mackenzie.
Mackenzie, and I like to bake, and my favorite color is purple and blue.
Purple and blue? Nice. I think Malia was coming. I see a finger or something.
Hi, my name is Isaiah. My favorite hobby is playing basketball, and my favorite color is navy blue.
Nice. Gabriel, you being shy today?
My name's Gabriel. My favorite color is pink, and I love to do basically everything.
Nice.
Oh.
And last but not least, we have Nalia, and then we're going to introduce our host today. Nalia Young, Miss Young. Oh,
My name is Nalia. I like to do gymnastics, and my favorite color is yellow.
Nice, thank you. And then we just had Jordan join on. Jordan, can you tell us your name and your favorite thing to do and your favorite color?
My name is Jordan Phillips. To do probably like to work out and stuff because I like working out because I'm a football player and my favorite color is blue.
Okay, a lot of blue lovers over here.
Yeah, a lot of blue. We have a couple of yellow. Yeah.
Okay, so we have Miss Lawrey. Lawrey. I'm going to say it wrong. We have Miss Aisha here, and she is our host for today. And she has an amazing, amazing, amazing background and experience, anything from working at NASA, where she looked at and studied sounds that you can hear in space, to not working with technology at businesses to improve businesses and how they're able to function and their efficiency by improving their technology. And now she is amazing at providing all types of funding opportunities for anybody that's trying to go to college, specifically in engineering as in their concentration. So you can ask any question. We're going to give Ms. Aisha the floor so she can tell us a little bit more about the things she's done, the things she studied, and hopefully you can just join in with anything that you're interested in more about. Okay, everybody? But remember, don't be shy and ask any questions you have.
And if you really, really, really are shy, put your questions in the chat. And then at the end, we'll open up the floor and we'll ask your question, not really for you, but we'll include it in the conversation.
Yes. And if anybody doesn't know what a chat is, it's at the bottom of your screen. There'll be a little bubble that'll say chat. And you can just type in your question there, and then we'll know it came from you, and we'll ask you, and then you can answer from there. All right. Welcome, Ms. Aisha.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. My apologies for being late. As Dr. Tay knows, I am usually on a multitude of conference calls. And so even though I have blocked my calendar, you know, things happen and I got a last minute meeting request. So my apologies for being late, but I'm so just excited. This is like the best part of my day. So you guys have made the best part of my day just by being here, being interested, and just really even taking the opportunity to think about, you know, different careers in engineering and really all of the STEM fields. So like Dr. Tay said, I'm an electrical engineer and I've done many things. And I want to also just talk to you about, you know, just having more opportunities and many options for whatever it is that you want to do within your career opportunities. So I want to show you what an awesome engineer looks like because you're looking at her. And I'm going to share a little presentation for you all just to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've worked on and why engineering is so important to me and why we really need more engineers. So just to tell you all a little bit about my background, right now I'm located in Potomac, Maryland, which is where I live with my husband, and I have twins who are probably about some of your ages. They're 12 years old, they're in 7th grade, and I was gonna have them join me today, but they are on a Zoom call for school right now, so they're not able to join. With my husband and my kids, and we moved here from New Jersey, so I'm a native from New Jersey, born and raised there. And when I was about your age, I had no idea what engineering was. I didn't have any role models. I didn't have people who looked like me to come in and talk about what engineering was. When I thought about a career, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer because I love to talk and I love to watch law shows. There were a lot of law shows on in the 80s when I was a kid. And so I was like, I want to be a lawyer. They look glamorous. They make a lot of money. That's what I'm going to do. And it wasn't really until I was a junior in high school that one of my teachers talked to me about engineering and asked me if I knew what it was. And I told her I had no idea. And she basically said, you know, you're good in math and you're good in science, and it's a way for you just to be able to combine both of those things together and to be able to do problem solving. So that's the first thing I really want to point out to you all, is that when someone asks you what is engineering, they give you a lot of complicated, long definitions. But engineering is just using math and using science to solve problems. And so basically engineers are problem solvers. So anytime you think about, I wonder how that works, I wonder why that does that, I have an idea where I can make that better, you're already thinking and being an engineer. So you don't have to wait until you go to school and get your degree. If you're doing that, as my kids are doing different things, I tell them all the time, you're an engineer already. You're thinking like an engineer. You're trying to figure it out. So in your classes, I'm sure you've learned about either the scientific method or the engineering design process. You're going through those steps, and those are the same things that engineers do and go through as they're trying to solve problems. And it could be the simplest thing. I was reading an article about a little girl. She was 7 years old, and she wanted to figure out a better way to be able to roll her backpack. And they have these rolly backpacks, and she wanted to improve upon it. So she worked with her parents, and she was able to improve upon the design and actually patent her design. And she's 7 years old. So no matter how young you are, it's not just something grown-ups do. If you would have an idea and it's something that you want to do, you can do it right now, because you're thinking, you're trying to solve problems. And when you go to college and you major in engineering, all they're doing is really just reinforcing and really teaching you how to think in a more like critical and analyzing way of how to solve a problem, right? So I will give you an example. I tried to do a video and it didn't work out so well. So you have to use your imagination. So say if I had a tennis ball. If I had a tennis ball and I needed to get it into a can, and I wanted to throw it into the can, but I had a line that I could not cross. My feet could not cross this line, but I needed to get this tennis ball into the can. Can anybody tell me any ways of how you think that I could get that ball into the can without my feet going past the line? I can't cross my feet past this line, but the can is a little further away. So how would I be able to get the ball into the can without moving my feet behind the line? Does anyone want to share any thoughts they have?
Me.
Sure. Tell me your name.
Isabella.
All right, Isabella, tell me what you think.
I think throw it.
You can throw it. That's right. Great, great answer. You can definitely throw it. And you want to probably have a couple of tries to see if you can get that tennis ball into the can. Great answer. Mm-hmm. Anyone else have any ideas?
Me.
Yes, tell me your name.
Kayla.
Kayla.
I would say the same thing too.
You would say the same thing? You just want to trying to throw that ball and try to get into the can?
Yeah.
One more. Anyone else have another idea about how we would get that ball into the can?
Me.
Okay, and tell me your name.
Kalia Horn.
Kalia?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Kalia, what do you think?
The same thing.
The same thing, to throw it? So I want you at some point, you guys, to try it. Try it today when you get a chance. Just put an imaginary line or put something down. You cannot cross your feet beyond that line. And you've got to try to get that ball into the can, right? So one of the things that you can do is when you're thinking as an engineer, you're confronted with a problem, right? So the problem is you have the ball, you're trying to get it into the can. You also have a limitation, or what we call a constraint, right? And so your limitation is you can't move your feet beyond the line. So as an engineer, you need to figure out what's the problem, what are your constraints and your limitations that you have to think about in order to solve the problem. So one of the solutions is you can get down on the floor, right? You just get down on the floor and you can crawl and you can put that ball into the can, making sure that your feet don't go past the line, but you still get the ball into the can. And so when I show this demonstration, many of the students say, you cheated, you know, you went over the line. But the only constraint that I had was I could not move my feet, right? It didn't say anything about my body. So I would be able to get down on the ground and crawl and just drop it right into the can, right? So that's a real simple example of, as an engineer, you're just trying to solve a problem and you're given different constraints as to, you know, your limitations to be able to do it. So you go through a process, and some of you mentioned throwing it. That's a test. So you're testing what you can do to be able to solve the problem. And you're going to have to go through many tests, you know, as an engineer, if you're thinking about designing things. So never stop thinking that you're an engineer. Every time you have a thought, an idea, and the main thing is that engineers are problem solvers. They like to solve problems. Okay, so I studied electrical engineering, and I didn't know when I got to college what type I wanted to do. There are so many different types, but I didn't know which one. I was always fascinated with like electricity and how things worked as well. You know, like, why does the TV come on and everybody can see the same thing at the same time? And how does it work? And looking at, when I was a kid, we didn't have like laptops and like the first computers had come out, but I always was curious, like, how did the computer work? And, you know, how were you able to do so many different things with it? And now you guys can do many more things with it, whereas now your phone is your computer. So it has definitely grown so much. And so I thought that's the one that I really want to get more information about and to really study upon. And so I chose electrical engineering as my degree. And one of the internships that I had was working at NASA, which was so cool. It was a great experience. And I really studied acoustics. Does anyone know what acoustics is? Have heard of acoustics? What about sound? Has anyone heard about sound?
Yes.
Yes, you all heard about sound, right? You can hear my voice, so you can hear the sounds, and you hear things outside, you hear each other. So those all sounds. And acoustics is just the science of sound, right? It's just being able to really understand and study sound and figure out how it works, how to be able to eliminate sound. And that's what acoustics is, just studying sound. So that's a really just basic, simple definition for you to remember. So one thing you can take away, tell your friends and your family that you know what acoustics is, right? Is that somebody's doggy? So now that we all understand what acoustics is, we can talk about the science of sound, right? So what is sound? So sound is just a kind of energy that's produced when things vibrate, right? So if you talk and you tap your throat and you make a sound, everybody do that. Right? So you are producing energy because your vocal cords are vibrating. Right, so that's what sound is. That's the purest, simple definition about sound. It's really energy that really comes when things vibrate.
There.
Your doggy's trying to take over the show. And so one of the things that I did in some of my research is to really understand and explore, is there sound in space, right? So you know, you have to think about sound, and we talked about the fact that sound is energy that vibrates. So when astronauts go up into space, you know, sound does travel like waves, or like you hear people say, you're traveling at the speed of light, right? But unlike that, sound travels by making molecules vibrate, and molecules are just air, right? So air is a molecule, right? So in order for sound to really travel, you have to have something for it to travel through, and that something is air, okay? When you're on Earth and you hear sound, your ears are vibrating air molecules. So that's how you can hear. You can hear the sound and the energy even when you tap your throat. That is energy that's coming. And there's air, which are the molecules. That's how you're able to actually hear the sound. But when you're in space, there are large, like empty areas. If you look up at the sky and you see all of the stars, where the astronauts are going, there's huge empty areas between the stars and the planets. So there's no actual sound out there, so you cannot hear out there. But when the astronauts go into the spacecrafts, because there's so much equipment, it's very loud in there. And there's a lot of sound that is inside of there. So just so you understand, like there is no sound necessarily in space, but there's a lot of sound and a lot of noise in the spacecrafts where the astronauts are, right? So one of the things that I needed to do is to do some research on how astronauts sleep in space, you know, how they're able to sleep. And if you see the picture, they sleep very confined, and they have to be held down because why do they need to be held down while they're in space? Does anyone know why you would need to make sure that the astronaut is really strapped down? Okay, Isabella.
Because they'll float.
That's right, because they will float. There's no gravity, so they're constantly floating around. So while they're sleeping, they sleep in something that's kind of like a sleeping bag. It looks kind of like a sleeping bag, and they're down so they don't float around. But while they're sleeping, if you see, there is equipment because they're in a very tight, confined space. So there's a lot of equipment in their area, which makes it very noisy. So one of the things that I had to do in researching acoustics is to understand how to really make sure that the astronauts are able to sleep and it's not so noisy and there's not a lot of sound coming in there, because they need to be very well rested so that they can perform their experiments and do all of the things that they need to do in space. So, but you guys could see, yes? Okay. What she was showing you all was the different sleep compartments astronauts is in, that they sleep in. And again, they sleep like in a sleeping bag, and it holds them down. So she was showing you, and you see how close they are. Like they go into, I mean, they're so small. And I actually was able to go into the International Space Station. And when you go inside, it is so tight in there. It looks huge when you see it and they bring the video cameras in. But when you go inside, they have very limited space to be able to move around. And because you all couldn't hear that well, there was a lot of noise and sound that was coming from all of the equipment that was in there. So one of the things that I worked on in my research, how to be able to make sure that it's not so noisy, so would be able to sleep while they were, you know, in the spacecraft, because it's very noisy in there. So again, it's not noisy in space. There's no sound in space. But once they get into the spacecraft, it's very loud and very noisy. So we really had to think about noise control and how to, the acoustics that are in the spacecraft. And when you think about the acoustics, you also have to think about equipment, because while it's really noisy in other environments, you really want to make sure that when they're performing really critical experiments that, you know, and they have to be able to sleep, that the acoustics in the spacecraft really adjust to them being able to do that. So to control the overall noise in the environment, we really have to control the noise output of all of the different devices. And there's so much equipment that's in there, right? So, I mean, you have to think about all of the fans that are in there and pumps and all of the computers and all of those different things. They make a lot of noise. So we really had to really make sure that the space vehicle environment wasn't too noisy and it didn't have a lot of irritating sounds when they tried to get sleep. So that was a really cool research that I was able to work on. And we had to do a lot of tests, which involved really looking at a lot of the sound waves and also the materials, because materials is also very important. If you are in your house and you shut your window, do you still hear the sounds that are outside? Do you still hear the sounds that are outside even if you close your window?
Yes.
Yes, right? Because, you know, a lot of times it's the glass and it's really not soundproof. So you can still hear, although it's not as loud. So when we were thinking about eliminating as much noise, we had to think about what type of material was in the spacecraft to really be able to eliminate that noise. Have you ever seen recording studios on TV or anything like that? Has anyone ever seen like a recording studios where people go and they sing or they record music? Has anyone ever seen that, like a recording studio?
No.
No? Well, many of the studios, they are really called soundproof rooms. Why do you think they need a soundproof room when they're recording in a studio? Anybody?
So they can hear. Or they can hear?
Not so they can hear, but so they can keep the noise out, so they can't hear. They need a soundproof room so that there's no noise that'll be coming in, so that they're able to record the music without any sound. And so many times those soundproof rooms are made with certain materials so that the sound doesn't get through, right? So that's what you need. And so as an acoustics engineer, when you're studying that, it goes for whether you're looking at a spacecraft, whether you're looking at being in your house. Maybe there's construction that's going on that will provide loud noises. So you need to think about not only the sound, but different materials that you'll be able to make sure that you keep the sound out, okay? So, you know, I didn't want to go into too much detail, but, you know, for the basic overview, just to give you guys an idea to understand what acoustics is, what sound is, what some things that acoustic engineers do, and think about it in terms of sound. Acoustics is just the study of sound, and that's it. Does anyone have any questions about what I've talked about so far?
No.
Gabriel? Is that your name?
Yes, ma'am. So theoretically, if you were to spill water or something like that in space and it created a line of ice towards something that created sound, could theoretically, from the point that you spilled the water to the point where the end of the ice is, could you theoretically hear the sound because the sound has a medium in which to travel through?
If you're in the spacecraft, then yes. If you're out in space, then no. There's no sound in space, but if you're in the spacecraft, you would be able to hear it. But if you were out in the atmosphere, then no, you would not be able to hear it.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Gabriel, can you tell us why the ice would form? You mentioned spilling water and ice forming. Can you help us understand why that would happen?
So if you if you spilled water in space, since space has no atmosphere, it has no way of trapping heat, meaning the water would freeze on contact of exiting out of the bottle and into space. So I was asking my physics teacher about that, and she said that it was implausible. So I had to ask again, just in case there are multiple answers to the question that I was asking.
No, that is a great question. I knew it was going to be great when you started with theoretically. Anyone else have any other questions?
If you do, you can just unmute yourself because everybody's.
Yeah, you can just unmute if you have any questions.
Do you have any question? Do you have any question, Bella? Shit.
So I also wanted to, you had a question, Dr.
Yes, I have a question. So I heard a lot of noise inside of the shuttle. And I get that there's no noise on the outside, but if you're sleeping, and if you're a sleeper like me, I like quiet and peace. So does that affect the astronauts when they're sleeping and they're hearing all this shattering and all these other noises going on with the shuttle?
Yes. So again, if you, you guys couldn't really hear that well, but if you saw when she was going into those little pods, again, they are so small. Those pods that they sleep in are very small. So one of the things that they do is they will usually wear soundproof headphones or earplugs of some sort to really keep the sound out. And at the time that I was doing the research, it was in the 90s. So it was a while ago. So what we have found in doing the research of acoustics in the spacecrafts has changed dramatically since I started doing the research. And I would say I hope that maybe some of the research that I did had somewhat of a hand in how it has, you know, developed. But it has improved so much that I know at the time they were wearing soundproof headphones to really keep out the noise, because it's really important for them to be able to sleep and get sleep, because they have so, I mean, you would think, you know, what are they doing in that spacecraft? But if you ever see any of the spacecrafts up close, they are huge. You know, if you look at them and maybe on a, you know, satellite, or you looking at Google Earth, they look very small. But when you see them up close, they are huge, and it's a lot of equipment in there. And although they are huge, the space that the astronauts have to maneuver is not as big as it looks from the outside. So it is quite noisy. And people don't really think about the fact of, although there's no noise in space, how is within the spacecraft. You said to hear all of those things, you have so much equipment going on, they have processes running, and so there's noise constantly. But that's how they sleep, and they get into those like sleeping bags, and then they get into the pods, and they put on the headphones. And, you know, if you are able to talk to an astronaut, they will tell you sometimes that they don't even hear the noise. Like after, you know, a certain amount of time, even though they have on the headphones, they've gotten so used to it that they've automatically started to even drown out a lot of the sound. So it doesn't even fade, even when they are awake and they're performing experiments. You know, it's just like maybe there are noises that are in your house that you know that are there, but when someone else comes in, they point it out, but it doesn't even faze you because you've heard the noise so much. In my grandmother's house, like her toilet would run and you could hear the noise, right? And it just was so, she was so used to it that it didn't even bother her. But when people would come in, they would be like, why does it sound like there's water running? But she was so used to it that she began to just drown it out. And we'd be like, Grandma, you got to get the toilet fixed. So I hope that answered your question.
How does that affect the astronauts when they return to Earth?
So that is a great question. Many times when they return to Earth, they really have to go through like a decompression period, because they have to get adjusted, not only just to sound, but their whole equilibrium and everything. And it also depends on how long they've been in space. There are astronauts, they may go up and maybe they're there for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but it is really impactful for those astronauts that could be there. And so they have to go through a period where they have to be able to adjust to just being back where there's gravity. right? Because they are used to floating around. So they have to go through a series of tests, you know, for performance, like on their body and different functions to see, you know, how well they're doing in their equilibrium. I mean, it affects everything, how they eat, their sound, even in terms of sometimes their sight. Not that they lose their sight or anything, but because they're in the spacecraft and they're seeing just like equipment and everything, so they have to get all of that just back on the same page, back together. So they have to go through a lot of tests. So it definitely affects them when they return back to Earth.
When you mentioned gravity and just equilibrium, I wonder how it affects their organs, like their internal organs.
Right, so those are other tests that they need to do. And they've also found, so there was an astronaut, I think his name was John Kelly. He had a twin brother. They were both astronauts. And he, I don't know if it was John or his brother, and I can't remember his brother's name, but one of them spent, I think it was at least a year or more in space. So when he came back, even his body composition was different than his brothers, and they're identical twins, right? So it definitely affects everything. So, I mean, it was really interesting to see. And wow, I wish I didn't even think that's a great question. I can send you all more information, or you can even look it up, but I know that it affected his composition. And for his brother, they were no longer, in some instances, identical, because it was something about the effect that space had on him where he came back. And it just, so I'm not the scientist part, but it definitely affected his organs and everything. So you have to go through a series of tests. But that's a great question. Great question. So if there's anything that you all, really love, I just also want to say you can turn it into a career in engineering. Even if you're thinking about maybe another career. So my daughter, who I mentioned, she's 12. She wants to be, right now, a surgeon. And so I try to really encourage her in that aspect. But I also say, do you know that you can also do biomedical engineering? And so biomedical engineering is just the ability to be able to combine the medicine and to combine the engineering together, right? So doctors are experts at, maybe performing the surgery, making sure that you're okay. But many of the devices that they use, they don't have expertise in those devices. They don't have expertise in prosthetic limbs. They're able to perform the surgery, but they don't have the expertise in how the prosthetic limb was created or the robotic limb was created, right? So that's a way that you can combine two different careers and be able to put them together, right? So she can still go to medical school, but she can study biomedical engineering. And then that may also give more opportunities, right? So I told her, I was like, so you may have a leg up on the doctors now. If you're in there and you're performing the surgery, you can talk about the fact that you understand how this robotic limb actually works because you were able to study it, right? So that's a way to be able to combine, if you're interested in medicine and if you're interested in engineering, you could put them together. Another career that you can do that with is law, right? So if you're interested in being a lawyer, you can study engineering. There's something called patent lawyers, and I talked about the fact that the little girl was able to get a patent on her Rolly backpack, right? So there are designs that are involved in that, and you don't want someone to be able to steal your idea or your designs, so you have a lawyer represent you, right? So if you're a patent lawyer, you have the ability to understand the engineering part of it, so the design part of it, and you have the law part of it. So you bring those two things together, right? So you have the ability to do that. And even with being a teacher, I talk to teachers all the time, and when I talk to them about engineering, they're like, I could have been an engineer. And I'm like, yes. They're like, if somebody would have just talked to me, I could have done it. And so now you have many engineers that are going into the classroom, and they're going back and they're becoming educators and they're teaching. And so you have that foundation as an engineer that you can bring to the education field and be a teacher, right? So one of the things that I really love is the ability for engineers to be able to jump into all these different areas. You can jump into medicine, you can jump into law, you can jump into sales, you can jump into management. So there was an article that I was reading that said about 75% of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies all have a foundation in a STEM field, right? So that foundation in a STEM field really helped them to be able to rise to the level of being the president of Verizon, or, you know, being the president of, you know, Goldman Sachs. So because it teaches you to really think and analyze things. And so that really helps when you're in business, right? So, but you can't really say the same thing for those other careers, right? So you don't hear doctors saying, yeah, this is really cool. I'm operating on this prosthetic limb. I think I want to study engineering, right? Or, you know, you don't hear many teachers say, you know, even though they say, wow, I could have been an engineer, to say, I think now I want to go into engineering, right? Or many lawyers that say, now I want to go into being an engineer. But as an engineer, you can jump into all these different fields. And it's, you know, no matter what it is you want to do. As chemical engineers, you can think about the chemistry part of it. And when you think about the chemistry part of it, you can think about your shampoos, your laundry detergent, your dish detergent, your baby powder. Chemical engineers all have a hand in that. Your nail polish, hair dye, all of those things. So, you know, if that's something that you're really interested in, that could be a career for you. And not only just the chemicals, but the packaging that it comes in, right? So I just want to show you guys a quick example. I know we have like a few minutes, but I wanted to show you a quick example of how all the different fields really work together. And I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Can you guys see my screen? Yes, okay. So I wanted to show you my favorite chocolate, right? So this is a chocolate bar. I love, love chocolate. And I just wanted to show you a way that all the different areas of engineering work together to really produce this chocolate, right? So I talked about chemical engineering, right? So not only do they think about the chemicals, but they also have to think about the methods that are developed to really keep the food fresh. You don't want to get a chocolate bar and maybe it doesn't have a good taste, right? So the packaging of the chocolate bar is so important to make sure that it's fresh, and also to make sure that it's not broken. Because when I'm in the store and I'm looking for chocolate, it may not be important to anybody else, but I want to break my own chocolate, right? So I don't want to get the chocolate bar that's already broke up into pieces. So chemical engineers think about that as well. And then for mechanical engineers, if we think about the mechanical systems and the factories that the chocolate is produced in, there are a lot of different machines that really help with making sure that the chocolate is on the belt and that it goes off, because there's a lot of chocolate bars that are being produced. So they have to make sure that they're moving at a fast pace, and mechanical engineers think about that part of it. And then you have electrical and computer engineers. So they think about all of the computer and the systems to be able to manage like how many chocolate bars are coming down the belt at a time, right? And then there are civil engineers, and people would think like, what does civil engineering have to do with making this chocolate bar? But they really have to think about the building that the chocolate is in, the design of it, the structure of it. Not only that, they also do a lot of planning, right? So would you want a chocolate factory right next to your house?
Yeah, yes.
As much as I love chocolate, I wouldn't even, because you would smell it constantly, right?
Oh, yes.
All the time. So
Aisha, so I lived in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Oh my goodness.
I worked at Hershey Medical Center, and every morning I woke up to the smell of chocolate. And although it was lovely, I was like, I can't do this anymore.
I know, after a while, it's like, that's enough chocolate.
Even candy.
Yeah, so the civil engineers need to think about what is called urban planning. And they need to think about where factories are placed. You don't want to put a factory right next to your house in a residential area or a school. So they have to map out and look at where certain things are placed, right? So that's what the civil engineers do. And then the industrial engineers, right? You can make a small batch of chocolate in your kitchen and you're like, this is good, this is just for me. But what if everybody in your school said, can you make me some chocolate? That would be a little bit harder to do, right? So the industrial engineers have to think about how you can really mass produce this chocolate to be able to get it out to the whole world and not just a chocolate just for you. So I really wanted to just be able to show you all that you can have one particular product, one thing, and all these different aspects of engineers have to really work together to really be able to produce this product, right? So if you know, that's something else that I hope you walk away with. Like, I don't want you to think, oh, only electrical engineers do that and touch that. Only chemical engineers do that and touch that. But one of the other cool things is that engineers really work in teams, and you can work with a team of people, and then you get to really learn about all the different areas. So I will stop there and see if you all have any questions. You guys have any questions?
Don't have any questions? Any lingering questions? Make sure you ask them now.
No, we don't have any questions.
No questions. So do I have any future possible engineers?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, that's really cool. I'm happy to hear that. So for the one who said yes, what maybe are you thinking about right now?
To make stuff.
To make stuff. Well, again, that's how you even start right now. You're an engineer because you're thinking about, I wonder how this works. When you have that question, you are thinking like an engineer, right? So list of like misconceptions I want to give you about engineering is that you need to be a genius in math or science. You do not need to be a genius, right? You just have to understand math and understand science, but you don't need to be a genius, because engineers are also very creative, right? There's a lot of art in engineering and design. So you don't have to be a genius in math and science. You just have to understand how to use it to be able to do what it is you need to do. Don't have to be a genius. The second one is that engineers are only males. So not true, because you are looking at a female, and she is an engineer. So within biomedical, 50% are females, right? So although engineers, you will see and hear people say, are predominantly boys, predominantly men, but women are engineers. So for you ladies, you can be an engineer. And then the last one is that engineers cannot communicate. That's a big one, that, you know, we only deal with numbers and that's the only thing we can do. And we work in, you know, a little cubicle or in a lab by ourselves. But engineers can communicate. You have to be able to communicate, because if you do have that product, like again, I'll go back to the little girl with the rolly backpack. She had to be able to communicate where her idea was in order for her to even be able to get a patent. right? So you have to be able to communicate. You can have the best product in the world, but if you can't explain to someone your idea, what your product will do, it won't be as good. So you have to be able to communicate what your idea is. Okay, so those are huge misconceptions, and you all will be surprised that there are many grown-ups who still have some of these misconceptions. So you are doing really well, the fact that you are learning about them right now. Any questions? So who learned something today? I learned something too. I learned something about you all. I'm really happy that you all learned something. Don't forget, make sure that you're able to share this with someone and talk about. Who can tell me what acoustics is?
Oh, I don't know.
The study of sound.
Right. It's the study of sound. Science of the sound. That's what acoustics is. So as you're making noise around the house and everybody's quarantined, I'm sure there's much more noise than it used to be. I know, especially in my house too, because I used to work from home all by myself. And now I have my kids, my husband, and everybody's on conference calls. So it is definitely much more noisy. And then you have landscapers outside, and they come 8 o'clock in the morning, and they're trying to still, do their landscaping. So it's noisy. So, thinking about where am I going to sit so it's not so loud, and you don't want to disturb the other people in the house if they have work to do and calls. So that sound, the sounds and the noise that's in the house. So if you're trying to figure it out, you are an acoustics engineer in the making. Well, if you guys don't have any questions, I just want to thank Dr. Tay and Dr. A for having me. Again, I really hope that you all learned something. It's not so much that I want to make you engineers, but I want to be able to give you information. So if you think about it and just understand the basic simple definition of engineering using math and science to solve problems.